Hello, everyone. I'm Rick Coluccio, and you're listening to or watching the Recruiting EQ podcast. Today's episode is episode number 100, which is totally insane. I have no idea what anybody said in the past 99 episodes. No, I'm kidding. I do remember very well. Here we are. You'll notice our little 100 episode logo at the top, which was very hastily thrown together before this episode. But there you go. This way we can commemorate it forever. I am thrilled to have with us on episode number 100 our featured guest, Alexis Alvares. Alexis, how are you?
Hi, Rick. I'm doing well. Thank you. I'm excited to be here and excited to be guest number 100 or show number 100.
Right? It's going to live forever in infamy.
Very cool. I live in infamy now.
Exactly. When one day this podcast gets as popular as Joe Rogan or whatever, then people will look back at this day.
I'll be the top 100.
Exactly. We know it. Well, thank you for being here. Alexis, you and I have met under circumstances that are very recruiting-y. Unlike some of the guests I've had on here have been through the podcast services and people who are looking to be on podcasts. That was not the case with you per se. You have your own podcast though, which we will happily plug here. But I was reaching out to you cold, just for like sales or recruitment purposes. I don't even remember which, maybe both.
Yes, I don't really remember. I think it was a sales sales pitch.
That does sound like me. But I mean, Career Rockstars is just, and obviously you weren't, you were very polite in your response, but we weren't going to get on a call. But I was just kind of like, I don't know, your profile and the website for Career Rockstars really just caught my attention, and I thought there would be a good story there, and I was not wrong. But just to give everyone who's listening a snapshot of what that was that really caught my attention is, here you are, you've started your own executive search firm, which is great. I love a founder story from someone who was in the industry before. And then not only that, this is an executive search firm which focuses on diversity within the investment space, capital markets, hedge funds, all that kind of stuff, or like private equity and so on. But you've also branded yourself with this kind of music industry sort of vibe, right? Calling it Career Rockstars and this sort of like rock and roll vibe all over the website. And I love that because it's a differentiator that really stands out. And on this show, we talk a lot about like, how are you going to, what's your personal brand going to be? So yeah, I mean, that's just fascinating stuff that stood out to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very, the name is very contrarian to essentially what private equity is or what the investment space is. And if you look at, my competitors, or you just look at the space, like the names of firms are usually named after their, like a street, or a couple of last names kind of like put together, and the recruitment firms that serve them as well. And so it is a very contrarian kind of approach to what is a very stuffy space, actually.
Right. And so let's get into a bunch of questions on that. But first off, in your own words, if you want to let people know, a little bit about what you do at Career Rockstars, that'd be great.
Yeah. So executive search firm focused on the lower middle market and middle market, private equity, private credit, and venture capital space, both in the US and European markets. Been very focused on primarily investment talent, but I have done a number of roles within the fund level and portfolio company level as well. But I would say my sweet spot is really investment talent for these firms. And like you mentioned at the beginning, I've been very focused on broadening the talent pool to include greater representation of not only women, minorities, but I also tend to speak very loudly for US vets, as well as non-traditional candidates. And so non-traditional candidates are those that don't typically follow the traditional career path into private equity or into the investment space. So really looking at how to really broaden that candidate pool and ensure that we are presenting candidates that just come from different experiences and different backgrounds.
I love that. And I love everything you're saying, because broadening the candidate pool to me is also aligned with pivoting the hiring approach toward more of an EQ or human driven level, and less about having tick boxes in someone's resume that have to have a certain kind of pattern pardon me, in order to even talk to a person at all, which I think it's always been a bit of a problem in my opinion since I've been in staffing for, which is only 13 years. I got into it very late, but I do feel like since COVID or during COVID, it got really transactional, for lack of a better word, even in like higher level roles where people
Mhm.
kind of like, I just want to see this. Oh yeah, and this. Oh, and also I only want to see this. So it's like, here's this giant list of checkbox things that you require in order for to even look at a candidate, and it's a little bit out of control. Where it's like someone might be an amazing personality fit for the organization, a total game changer for them, but they're not even going to be met because they're not fitting the mold that they've created, right? So how have you seen that as a function of throughout the time that you've been working at Career Rockstars, or that you've been, sorry, not working at, but running Career Rockstars, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
that whole battle?
Yeah, it's definitely a battle. It is hard because this is a space that has, been very much so dictated, or has followed this playbook mentality for recruitment for as long as the industry has been around. And so what you've seen over, I would say, especially over the last decade, is a little less of a reliance on this playbook mentality, and a little bit more of a broadening in terms of different candidates. But I would say, part of that is attributed to the fact that the space is no longer as opaque as it used to be. If you go back to, like and I'm sure we'll get into this, but like I fell into private equity. I didn't just, like it wasn't my, career path of choice. And I always say, and you can see it on my LinkedIn, that no little girl will ever say, when I grew up, I want to be the managing director of a lower middle market private equity firm, that invests in whatever,
Right.
these three things, right? Like you have to have that exposure from a very early age. And most of us do not have that unless you've had a father or someone familiar that has worked in the space. So all of the references that we have that we might have had maybe 10 years ago about private equity were really, I think, stemmed from what we saw in movies, and we had kind of a faint idea, because that's exactly what what my experience was when I started working in private equity. I had no idea what it was, and like any good recruiter, I was like, I'll figure it out. Like I can do this, and I'll figure it out. And so, I have seen over, this last decade or so that there has been that shift, because now it's not as opaque, because now we have a great number of firms that have emerged, that have been founded over the last, especially post COVID. So that has also kind of helped to, to soften, I would say, the barriers to entry, and in some ways kind of democratize that entrance into what has typically been a very almost like a like secret society type of space. And so with that, you see a lot of different types of founders, and a little bit more of this focus on diverse representation, because of the fact that we're seeing more diverse players start their own firms. However, it's still very difficult. And if you look at very traditional firms, they are difficult to break. They are difficult to kind of break that mold, that if they, sometimes you hear firms saying, I only recruit from Harvard, or I only
Right.
recruit from, like the Ivy Leagues.
Yep.
And so, what I have found, and what has worked for me over the years, is that I'm just extremely intentional with the way that I work, and that I think is the only way to really broaden the candidate pool, and is the only way to really, work with firms that are aligned with my values. So, for me, increasing representation in this space and providing access to different types of profiles is a priority to me. Like, and I understand it's not going to be a priority to other firms out there. That's okay. I don't want to work with you guys anyways, right? Like I want to work with firms that also align on those on those values. And so, those are the firms that, if they are diverse founded, and even if they're not diverse founded, they have some kind of commitment to wanting to see broader talent pools. Those are the firms I find myself attracted to, and that also want to work with me. Like those very traditional guys don't want to work with me. And so I think that, kind of maybe looking into the future, I think that those firms will, I mean, they will continue to exist, but I think at some point, just given kind of how the landscape is changing around us, they will also have to kind of soften kind of their requirements or their criteria. But I do have to say that, in this space, you can't just have EQ. You can't just have, that likability factor. Sure. You have to have the really strong technical foundation. And, like that part, because you could probably get away in some industries or sectors with maybe not necessarily having, let's just call them like the hard skills, like you can, or just having like a superficial understanding of them, you can maybe get away with some of those things. But in this space, I have found that, you have to not only be really strong technically, and be able to check those technical boxes, but you also have to come to the table, with something that adds additional value, that the team can, that the firms can see, especially if you don't fit kind of that mold.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So it's like you if you don't fit the mold, you need to be bringing everything plus kind of thing in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I talk about, I was on another webinar yesterday with their interns for, it's part of it's called the SBIC investing program, young scholars. And so the SBIC is the investment arm of the SBA, right? And so there's a lot of credit firms that are part of this SBA program. So SBIC funds. And so I always kind of give this webinar to they are, I think they're sophomores and juniors in college. And so one of the questions, that they asked me is, I don't know what kinds of skills and things that they need. And so my answer is always the same. Like, of course, you're going to have the technical baseline, but then you're also going to have to, you could call it likability, you could call it gravitas, you could call it, whatever it may be, but all of that kind of encompasses the fact that you're likable. And if you're likable, you're going to build relationships really well and easily. And that is key. I mean, that is one of the key factors across any industry, but I would say, especially within kind of the private equity space, and just the overall, what the buy side is, right? In case anyone, buy side is essentially, private equity when you're buying companies, basically, right? And so that becomes incredibly important because it seems like a really big space, but at the end of the day, all these guys know each other. All these guys, they sometimes, they work on deals, and if they have really great relationships, they're saying, hey, this deal isn't for me, for my firm, but hey, let me quarterback it to you because I know these guys at another firm, right? So everyone kind of knows each other. So that piece beyond the technicals becomes increasingly more important. And I think now, as we're heading to a very much so AI-driven world, those qualities and the focus on relationships are going to be, it's like a back to basics approach, I feel, right? Like you kind of see that like in general, right? Whatever trend like we're kind of heading to, we'll spend a few years there, and then there's going to be a tendency to kind of go back, right? And everything old becomes kind of new again. And so I think the same thing, for early talent as well, is that, those human qualities and the ability to really forge those relationships, talk to people, knowing how to talk to people, is going to become increasingly more important, because at the end of the day, in this space, especially, how do you acquire other companies? You have to go out there and you have to talk to founders. You have to talk to their teams. You have to basically understand, right now, robots, machines, software can't do that. And until they can, it's going to be that much more important to be able to master that skill.
Yeah, and when they can, I think we're all screwed anyway, right? So
exactly.
So this will be a very different show.
We have bigger problems.
We have bigger problems. It'll be run for the hills. It's over. But for now, that it's not all over, and hopefully won't be for hundreds of years, or at least 20.
Yeah,
we
at least until retirement.
hopefully, I'm praying for, yeah, another 20 years and then I'm good. But no, not to be selfish about it. In all fairness, I find everything you're saying super fascinating. It's kind of the mission statement of this show, among other things. That's why I started doing this 3 years ago. Is it just really feels like AI tools, even if it doesn't become fully sentient, right, unto itself, that it can go out and be like a human. It's like going to level the playing field pretty quickly for a lot of things. People can do this with tools with minimal investment. They'll be able to, most companies will be able to do the same thing. It almost kind of disappears in a way then. Once it settles, it's no longer a differentiator. Every company is going to have their AI tools and someone to program Claude to automate systems. Everyone's going to be able to do what now we're calling 10x the productivity. That'll just be productivity. That'll be normal productivity because
Mhm.
everyone can do it with the tools. All those things of I have more grit, I can make more cold calls. Sorry, that's not even useful anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like it all levels the playing field, and it's those human qualities that are going to be the only things left to differentiate yourself.
Exactly. No, I mean it raises the bar. I mean, if output is now, I mean, essentially everyone has the tools and the capability to produce, to increase output and to have, smarter, more well prepared responses and access to creating. In my world, you're creating investment reports, you're synthesizing information, and that would typically take weeks, days, like a very long time, and it was handled by the junior talent. And so now, if everyone can do that, it raises the bar,
Yeah,
right? Because now there's no excuse for you not to be able to do that. So it really, is going to not only raise the bar, but it's going to, I think, help us to, and I think we'll see it in a couple of years. I don't think it's necessarily here right now, at least not in my particular space. And I think, different sectors and industries might experience this at different moments, but at least in terms of the investment space, I think we're still a few years away from really seeing like a demand for, because I'm not having conversations right now about like I need to have someone that really understands AI and is completely fluid in this technology. Like I'm not
right.
having those conversations. The conversations are happening in a different part of the organization that are not, has more to do with how do we source deals faster and better, and how do we move those through the pipeline, but not necessarily about like the people that are coming in or the people that need to be in the firm and their use of that technology. So I think that we're still kind of a little bit of ways away from that. But I think what I'm finding, and I think that this is pretty, I think that this might be like a blanket statement for across the board here, but there's such a like AI is the it girl right now, right? Like everyone is talking about it. There's you can't go a day without reading about something, and but if really start to talk to the leaders, that are really kind of running, maybe not necessarily CEOs, but like senior level management, they, what I hear is, there's not really like a strategy for it quite yet.
Yeah,
Like there's no strategy. They just know that they need to have it. We need to have it now, but we don't really know why
yeah,
or how or where it, like there's no AI strategy built around it, which I think will have repercussions, for sure later on if companies kind of take this approach. But that's kind of what I'm seeing. It's definitely kind of the, like I said, the it girl where everyone needs it, everyone wants it, but there's a lot of fuzziness around kind of how it works into into the strategy and into the culture of an organization. And that's where I think a lot of thought isn't really being put into this particular. We're just kind of looking at it in terms of like productivity,
yeah.
um, but it's certainly something that I think merits conversation in terms of like strategy and positioning and culture, especially in like my where I play. I'm not having or seeing any of those conversations, and then the guys that I talk to are like, yeah, we're not having those conversations, not yet at least.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the first ones to have those conversations will probably, have like a net negative because they'll be investing in something they don't really know what they're going to do with yet, right? And spend time on it. But I think that on a longer timeline, they'll be ahead of the race because they'll figure it out first. Everybody's going to have to dive in at some point and figure out how to do this, right? But I do think that there's merit in being, at least now. I mean, like 4 or 5 years ago, or 4 years, what is it, 3, 4 years ago when ChatGPT first went public? Maybe not. Maybe it wasn't the time yet, right? But I mean, I feel like the time is now to start figuring it out, because otherwise you're late to the party.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's trial and error,
yeah,
right? This is a little bit Wild West, I
totally.
think, and it's a little bit of trial and error, but I think at the same time, you also have to be really thoughtful, like you would any other business decision, right? That's going to that with the potential to impact any, organization, any investment into anything, is really looking at kind of the um like what are the gains and at what cost are those gains coming at,
Yeah.
and I'm not so sure that that's maybe at least in my segment is kind of being discussed at the level that it should be,
Yeah.
at least right now.
For sure. I get the same impression, and thanks for confirming that. I've gone about this a little bit backwards because we dove in super hard, which is great because I'm enthusiastic to
I
talk
brought
about
that
this.
up, sorry, I brought
No,
the
no,
AI.
that's good. That's good. I'd like to come back to that though, but I'd also like to just sort of hear if we could get a little bit of your personal journey, like the story that has brought the woman we see before us today and brought you to this journey of, how you got on this path and where you're at right now.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I like this. We went backwards. We got everyone's attention, at least at the
There you go.
beginning.
Bam. AI
Bam.
check. All
Now
right,
you
here we
know
go.
my thoughts on AI. Cross that off the list.
Yeah.
So I'm originally from LA, and I'm an American who went abroad in college, and to the dismay of my parents, I just never went back. I went to study in Europe, and called Spain have called Spain home for the last 20 years. And so, I going back to what I said at the beginning, I never thought about a career in recruitment. I think most recruiters kind of fall into that bucket as well. But I got started, and like coming out of my MBA here, working for two business schools. So I worked in the careers department for two business schools. And when you work in a careers department, I mean, it's essentially like, a recruitment service. You're trying to help, those MBAs, or at least those were the groups that I was helping get placed into the companies that are interested in recruiting MBA talent. So I did that for, maybe about 4 years. And then I had my first baby, ended up leaving, and I started working at a startup. It was a heavily funded startup. So it wasn't like a struggling startup. It was a joint venture between a Swedish holding company that was helping to bring, at the time, kind of media companies and HBO to Europe, and Stars, which was an American entertainment kind of, primarily like linear and cable channels. And so they were looking to bring, at that time, we're talking maybe like 2014, they were looking to bring a streaming service to Spain. It was going to be the first streaming service. At the time, Netflix wasn't what it is now.
Yeah.
And there really were no players, especially in Europe at that time. And so I ended up getting hired into, I never worked at a startup. I had my own business when I was maybe like 24. I did it for like a year or two, and then, kind of called it quits, went on to get my MBA. So I was kind of familiar with kind of startup life. But I had this really big position. I was head of recruitment and HR for Europe and Middle East. I don't know, these people that trust me to do this with no previous experience. That's where the likability and personality, and at least having some kind of foundation,
Goes
in
a
handy.
long way. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really like my boot camp into recruitment,
Right.
because I had never really, working at a career center is very different than actually working at a startup that was looking to grow in Europe and in the Middle East. And I had no experience with the Middle East ever in my life, but found myself recruiting talent out of Dubai. And so it was development talent in Madrid, since Madrid was going to be the development hub. So all technology roles. And then what was in Dubai were all the marketing and digital roles. So I did that for, maybe about 2 years. They wanted me to move to Dubai. By then I was pregnant with my second kid. I said, no, I'm not moving. And I had the head of Spain ended up going to HBO. HBO was going to launch and roll out what is now HBO Go or HBO Max. I don't know what it's
Right.
called.
Yeah, they keep changing name every year, I'm pretty sure. So
Yeah, into Spain.
yeah.
And he's like, look, I can't bring you on as like a full-time employee, but I need you to help me with recruitment. And I was like, perfect. I'm pregnant. I don't feel good. I don't want to go into the office anyways. This is
Yeah, perfect.
2016, so pre-COVID.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I had been working from home before, it was an acronym and very popular. And I was managing recruitment and building out the team for HBO in Spain. And then I ended up doing a few other countries across Europe. And so it was a really interesting experience, and it was great. And I loved it, and aligned with kind of where I was in my life with starting my family. And probably about maybe 2 years into it, or maybe about a year and a half into it, I had a buddy from my MBA who had joined a private equity firm in New York and said, I need to build out my team, and I need a recruiter I can trust. And I don't, this is what he said. Don't get offended if you're in this bucket, but he goes, I need a recruiter I can trust. And I don't trust New York recruiters. And so
I'm
I was
Toronto
like,
anyway, so I'm Canadian. I'm okay here.
so I was like, sure, I can help you. He's like, you're working with a really big brand, so you must be good. And I was like, yes, I am. So like, and so I knew nothing about recruitment, I knew nothing about private equity. And I was like, yeah, of course I can do this. And so that's how
Amazing.
I got started into private equity. And I did, at one point, I was doing marketing and digital roles for HBO in Europe, and then doing private equity portfolio operations roles for New York. And I always joke, and people who've heard me talk will have heard me say this a million times, but this was at the height of Game of Thrones. And there were only, there's only so many conversations you can have about Game of Thrones before you're just like, oh my God, there has to be more to life than Game of Thrones. Because the conversations I was having with these operators and with these, these portfolio operations candidates were so much more enriching to me and so much more interesting. And I felt like I learned something, which I loved. And I just felt more compelled by that space than I did HBO. And in the end, it was perfect timing, because this is right around, I decided to kind of go double down into private equity right around when the talks, this was maybe about 2020, when they were going to be acquired, or the merger with AT&T and Time Warner, or I can't remember who they merged with, but anyways, it was like right around that time. So I ended up, kind of perfectly moving my focus to private equity. And so I've been really focused on private equity since then. And always from Madrid, looking at recruiting talent for firms in the U.S. For primarily American candidates, looking at U.S.-based firms, and then a couple of times I've had American firms that have looked to kind of set up shop somewhere in Europe, and I've helped them on establish themselves in the European markets. But that's kind of how I did that, and then to kind of touch on the diversity piece. When it was 2021 and the world was kind of falling apart, or at least that's what it kind of seemed like from my lens, sitting in Europe and kind of looking at what was happening in the US. And so I just decided that, I needed to be more intentional, and that what I could do, I had influence. I just had to find a way to use it in a way that made sense to me. And so I decided to really focus on this aspect of increasing representation in specifically to the buy side.
Right.
I had already been doing it, not at the request of my client, but I had kind of looked at my, the candidates and at the team that I was working with, and just said, it makes sense to start talking to more women, or it makes sense to start talking to some different profiles here. And so I did that. And after about a year, I looked back and I looked at the numbers, and I was like, wow, there's about 70% of the placements that I'm making are fall into like this diversity bucket. Either they're non-traditional, they're women, they're minorities, they're veterans. And so I just decided to kind of like, all right, I'm going to run with it. And when I really, the signal, or like the sign that I knew that, okay, yes, this was something that was, that was good, that was important, and that, made sense for my clients, is, they were basically saying, hey, we really like working with you because we like to see these different types of candidates. And we're not seeing that with other recruiters that we work with. We just really love to be able to see that you have such a broad list. And it just gives us that sense of like, okay, there, we're seeing lots of women, we're seeing these different kind of really enriching profiles. And so
Right.
I doubled down, and that's what, I decided to do. And the more I did it, the more I realized, that it was just something that I felt really important, was important to me, and really wanted to only work with firms that just align, like I said, with my values, and that feel that it's something, they also want to see, more women, or they want to see just diverse profiles. And, it's not like the 4 groups that I work with. I should say, like, I work with everyone.
Right.
But I tend to speak the loudest when it comes to women. It's, there's just so few women, or, much less proportionately to the men that are in the investment space. And so I speak the loudest when it comes to women. But I mean, I do a lot with veterans, and I talk a lot about non-traditional profiles and the value that they bring, just by not doing the traditional investment bank, Ivy League investment banking, private equity route. And so that's kind of been, my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, personally, coming from doing a lot of music industry stuff for years prior to being in recruitment, I get it, because I think that people use the term rock star in recruitment to just mean they're a big biller. But I think that to use the term rock star as someone who is a trailblazer, trendsetter, and not just following the pack feels a lot more real to the music industry approach of someone who makes it as like someone needs to have that it factor to be a rock star. They can't just put a lot of butts in seats. You wouldn't call them a rock star. You know what I mean? Like, they have to have that it factor, that star quality, that is something that's a little different, but a little extra also, like you're saying. So I feel like it's great. But I can also imagine in a world that's so sort of stodgy, where everybody has, a very cold, sort of impersonal look, like most money related industry companies are. Um, I think that some people would have considered that kind of branding and name to be kind of bold or brave or whatever, to not conform and to stick out that much. How did you feel about it when you started? Like, did you get any sort of negative comments on this, or were you just ignored by people who weren't the right clients?
No, I don't think I've ever been really ignored. I mean, if I'm being ignored, it's not because of my name.
No, no, no. Exactly.
Right? Like, if I'm having a hard time getting a hold of getting in front of a client or a candidate, it's not because of the name. I would say it has never. I've never had a negative kind of interaction about the name. I mean, the name is it's funny. I wish I had like a way cooler story, but the way that it came about was that I used to, when I was at the business schools, I used to give classes to the MBAs and to the students on just, like interviewing skills and like kind of everything you need before you, meet with a company. And one of the terms that I would use in that class is like, if you want to be a career rock star, right? Like, I would just kind of use that
Yeah.
term. And so it was kind of just became my term, that I use to refer to people that are just, like, they're rock stars. They're just like, they have it. They're good. They're strong. They interview well. They just
Yep.
have what it takes. Right. And so that's kind of how I went with it, like, or why I went with it. Cause I was like, yeah, this is it. And at the time, like when I started doing HBO, and it seemed very fitting. Right. And then I didn't really even think about it when it came time to, like when I pivoted to private equity. I just thought, okay, this still works for what I'm doing. It's still very much so aligned. So why would I change it? And then I
Yeah.
never really thought about it. But it's true that like all the wording, like if you go on my website, like it's very focused on like the rock star.
Yeah.
And I think I've had more positive commentary about, oh, that's really unique, or that's just, that's really different, really differentiated kind of branding. I've had lots of candidates that tell me that, they're my rock star, right? Like, I'm the rock star that you need to talk to.
That's amazing.
So, and I've considered going with a more like, I don't know, traditional name, but I've never really felt compelled enough to do it. Cause sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm the only one that has a, that has this like name, but again, like I'm very different than I think a lot of the other private equity recruiters out there.
Right.
And so I see it as something really positive. And people know who I am, and they know my name, and they recognize, they recognize, because there's no one else out there with that name, right? So it
Yeah.
definitely helps to separate me from kind of the rest of the players out there. I mean, on one level, and then of course the other aspect is that I'm just a little bit more focused on representation than than the other folks out there. So that's, I mean, like kind of two different angles.
Yeah, but they complement each other, because I think it makes sense to have that kind of unique branding, but then also be pulling for unique candidates that are a little bit different than the mold too, right? So that it just, to me, they feel very aligned, even though perhaps on paper they don't seem it. But I also think that, I've spoken to a lot of people who are starting their own company, or like about brand uplift and stuff like that, not just in recruitment, but just in my life for various different reasons over the years. People are scared, I find, to be themselves really online. I think that they feel like it's going to be seen as unprofessional, or they'll be judged in some way. Um, but I don't know how you feel about this. I feel like in a world where AI makes everything kind of an even playing field for the non-human qualities, it's going to be like everyone will be able to get massive reach on their post and their socials. Everyone will be able to pitch their services all over the world or whatever. This is almost globalization thing that's happening slowly but surely. We're not quite there yet, but it's happening. And I feel like the only thing you really have is to be yourself, or be brave enough to be a differentiator and do your own thing. And the more you can stand out, you will alienate some people, but that's good, right? You're alienating the right people, I think, if you're being yourself. Like, is that how you feel your experience has been, that you've been able to attract more of the right people by doing something that's a little bit different with your branding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, I'm really intentional. Like, I only want to work with a certain type of firm. I don't
Right.
work with firms that are like sharp elbow firms,
Yeah.
right? Like, that have that type of culture. I don't work there, or I don't work with them. I don't want them as my clients. And they look at me and maybe they won't take me seriously, or I don't know, maybe they just don't think anything of it. But like, I don't think that I call their attention either way. So it does a really good job of allowing like this natural filtration to occur, where only like the people that are really interested are gonna be attracted to what I'm doing, and those that aren't, it weeds them out, it filters them out. So I don't really have to appeal. I don't need to appeal to them, and I'm not bothered if I don't win their business.
Yep.
Right. And same thing with candidates. It is funny sometimes. Like I will get like very traditional candidates that come to me, and I always find it, like they're very, like they're the traditional kinds that go, Ivy League, they go to the like the Goldmans and the JP, like they're like very traditional, and they come to me because they're like, oh, I really like what you write. Like, I'm very active on LinkedIn. And I think I have a very different voice on LinkedIn than a lot of other private equity recruiters. And, the candidates come to me because of that, because I kind of write in this manner, and I talk about these topics that, I don't know, sometimes they're taboo, or they're just, like I take a different angle. So, I mean, I think that if there's anything, that maybe if I could say, like, you could learn from me is that, and that sounds like very unhumbling, but
No, but I agree.
but it's really, I really have always, and I look back in my life and I feel like I've been like this my entire life. I have always said different is good. And I remember being a kid, like in like third grade, and wanting to do like projects differently. Like, I
Yeah.
hated seeing the same project over and over again. Like, when we had to do something and present it to the class, and it was
Yep.
like the same thing. I remember being really annoyed by that and thinking, like, why can't they make it more exciting or make it more fun? Or I don't know. And so whenever I would do something, I would try to do it differently, because I just saw value in that. And so I guess it's no wonder that I do what I do and how I do it, because I've done it my whole life. I've done it
Yeah.
my whole life.
but that's great though. I was also was that kid, by the way, too, which is just kind of like,
Good.
can I
So
just
we would
write
have
a
been
short story? Can I do something? Yeah, exactly. I was always the one asking you to do a more exciting project. That was more work probably, but it's like, Jesus, this other thing is so boring. I can't even bring myself to do
Yeah.
it.
Exactly, exactly. And so like I just I never really posted on LinkedIn and really didn't, get really hyper focused on my brand until, like 5 or 6 years ago or so. And I really found my voice and it's just so I feel like it's really different. Like, like I talk about pregnancy and recruitment. I talk about, just a lot of different topics that I feel like hello, most recruiters are not talking not talking about that, at least not writing about it,
On
and
LinkedIn.
certainly
Yeah, yeah.
not like on LinkedIn. And I get you get a ton of reach out because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it just resonates with people, especially when when you talk to them about what they're maybe thinking, but not necessarily, brave enough to say, or comfortable enough to maybe say out loud. So I would say that, like, if having that personality, show through, and letting it be a part of the brand is incredibly important, and you will find your market. Like, again, like my I'm not trying to attract like the really traditional stuffy sharp elbow type of firms. There's a market for them, and there's
Yeah.
lots of recruiters that would work with them. I don't want that. Like, for me, when I'm looking at like the candidates that I place, I always kind of think like, all right, would I want to work at that firm? And two, like, can I go to sleep at night comfortably knowing that I've placed a candidate at a firm that I actually like, and I like the people there, right? Because I just wouldn't feel comfortable placing a firm for just to, for the hell of placing them, and just having them be at a firm that I know really sucks, like the culture is toxic. Like, I don't want that. I want to,
Well,
like,
yeah.
like, it's really fulfilling to me to know that I'm at a firm that is just, oh yeah, like, I mean, is it perfect? No, of course not. But, like, are they going to have a great career? Yeah. Are the people, really good? And am I comfortable that they're gonna be able to develop as professionals there? Yeah. So that for me is really important. That was like really long winded. I don't know what I
No,
didn't know
that's
what the
good. No,
question
no,
was.
no, no. That's awesome. See, because the thing is, everything that you were saying and just describing your approach is kind of why I was pushing to have a chat with you, and whatever, because I talk about this kind of stuff often on this show and in my I'm a rec to rec, right? So like, my clients are all staffing agencies, executive search firms, and consulting firms. So people will talk to me too about like, what am I seeing out there? What are other people doing? There's a certain like advising them on what's going on kind of quotient, right? And I feel like there for so long there's been this, even in social media and in LinkedIn particularly, this idea that like professionalism means leaving most of your personality out of the equation, maybe a tiny, tiny bit of it, but mostly you're in a cold way, kind of repping a brand which is also cold, which is decided in a boardroom from people you never met. Like, that's kind of the way that the entire job market and LinkedIn and everything has functioned for so long. Whether you're selling or whether you're trying to find a job somewhere too, it's been just send an application. It's all very cold. It's like, just answer with stock questions, put keywords on your resume that match the job description, and all this kind of stuff, right? And I feel like that is melting away. I feel like that AI is part of that. It's just the ubiquity of all this stuff, and how easy it is to just crank it out, and whatever, hiding behind keywords, branding, whatever, and not being yourself is detrimental now. It's not even that it's like a good idea. It is literally harming people from making the connections, which is the only real way that people are getting ahead now in today's market for the most part. It's not going to be from just like, well, I did my past experience, I put these keywords on the resume, I sent it to a few places in LinkedIn without knowing anybody there whatsoever, and then they hired me for a job immediately, and now I'm the president of the company or whatever the hell. There's barely any success stories, and everyone complains to me on both sides, we're not finding the candidates, and the candidates are like, we're not getting interviews. And I
Mhm.
think that the only people who are the recruiters who are doing what you're doing, right? Being very much being themselves in their brand end to end, and talking about their lives in a way that's not unprofessional, but that's also personal. Bringing
Right.
the personal to the table in on LinkedIn allows you to find like-minded people, and then those people reach out to you in a personal way. Connections are made and careers go up, right? But I feel like there is a lot of reticence. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, that both on clients and candidates, candidates and employees are scared to put themselves forward. Like but now I'm going to be judged for who I am a little bit. Are you
Yeah.
feeling some of that as well?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, like, I mean, I was there too. Like, I was like, oh,
Right.
I don't, like before I started, like years ago, like I didn't want to do that because I was afraid of
Same.
what people would think, right? Like, what if I offend someone, or what if I'm wrong, or what
Yep.
if, I don't know, whatever. Now it's just like, it doesn't work that way. Like you need to be a brand. That's the
Yeah.
bottom line. Even if you're a candidate, you are a brand. And this
Yes.
is what I tell candidates. Like I'm like the number, and I've written like a number of posts. I think I even wrote like an article about it on LinkedIn, about how like the best, like the least used kind of tool or secret that candidates are using is this, is LinkedIn posting and, LinkedIn articles. I'm like, as a recruiter, if I look at it from a recruitment lens, any opportunity to get a better understanding of the different dimensions that you bring to the table is a benefit to you, right? Assuming that you're not, like, let's just like lay the ground rules out. Like you're not saying anything terribly
Yes,
polarizing,
for sure.
right? Like you're keeping it, you can be personal and talk about your personal life without it, without oversharing, and
Yeah.
still maintaining that level of professionalism. Like that's, the role. I think the rules that like people need to understand, like that, like they're not mutually exclusive, right?
No.
And it's all part of the branding, right? And I had this argument. Well, it wasn't an argument; it was a discussion with someone who was like, "Oh, like LinkedIn. I'm sure you've heard this. LinkedIn has just become like Facebook, or it's become too, too personal." And I don't really find that to be the case. Maybe in certain sectors. In my sector, I don't really see it. I think that there's still a high level of professionalism, and people can know how to kind of thread in these personal, like the personality and like the
Right.
personal part of it. But I think that you want to be known, you want to be liked, and you want to be trusted, right? And you can't accomplish that by specifically talking about the deals that you work on or the projects, whatever it may be that is, like the specific to your industry, right? Like you need to be able to demonstrate those kind of human qualities, and posting and sharing your thoughts and having thought leadership is a way to humanize you,
Mhm.
to the reader, and it's a way to build that connection. And again, if we just look at it from like the recruitment of a candidate, again, if I can look inside your head, by reading something, most of the time it's going to be beneficial, right? Again, assuming that you're posting thoughtful things,
Right.
right? Like
Not
it
hate
allows me
speech
to get
or yeah, exactly.
like it allows me to get a better understanding of who you are, where you stand on certain things, your positioning, right? And so if I'm looking at two candidates, and I always talk about this, if we're looking at two candidates and they are equal, right? Like they both have great profiles, they come from great schools, right? Like they are strong candidates. And I look at like someone's very active on LinkedIn and they're writing profiles, or they're engaging in thoughtful conversation. Who am I going to contact first? Or who am I going to have a bias towards contacting first? It's probably the person that is active on LinkedIn and that is allowing me to kind of almost kind of like start, because it's kind of like any social media personality that we see on any of the channels that we engage with, right? Like it's like those people. You don't know them, but like you follow them, and so it allows you to feel like at least you have, like you kind of know them, and that's essentially what you're doing when you're doing that, and that does give you the upper hand.
Yep.
And the same thing with like firms. I'm always really surprised that more firms aren't more active on LinkedIn, because again, like it allows the candidate to see the personality of the firm and the culture, and it makes them that much more attractive. And I think the firms that the companies that do it well, they're able to attract a lot of candidates. They are able to kind of, pull in these people. So that's like the number one thing that I tell every single candidate that I work with. You should be sharing your thoughts. You should be
Yep.
engaging thoughtfully. with the people or with the players in your space, because then you do that enough, then you can start to reach out to them, and it's not a cold outreach, right? It becomes a warm outreach. Does it take time? Yeah, it takes time. It does take time to kind of, it's not a quick fix or a band-aid
No.
to getting ahead in the to getting a job, but it is something that is extremely beneficial, and but it does require you to kind of lower those, to maybe put yourself out there, depending on exactly what you're, and what I tell everyone is that, like, you're gonna have a lot of posts that just suck and like
Yeah,
no
and that's
one's gonna
okay.
like them.
Yep.
And you're gonna pour hours into making this like really great post, and it's probably excellent, but for one reason or another, the algorithm or whatever, you're not going to get any traction, and it doesn't matter. Like, you need to be consistent, and you need to keep doing it, because someone is going to read it, and they
Yeah.
might not like it, but I've had so many people, clients and candidates, that have said, I've been following you for years. I love the content that you write. And I'm thinking, like, well, you've never engaged, you've never given me a like,
That's
you've
it.
never
People
done
don't.
anything, like, why are you lurking in the shadows?
You're right, but people are afraid even to do that. I think that there's a fear of putting themselves out there, even to just engage with other people's content. But yeah, two things that come to mind with what you were saying. I fully agree, and I feel like this is kind of the big hack that everybody needs to clue into, right? Is to figure out how to put yourself out there and to do it all the time, and not see it as like, oh well, I'm already busy from my job, I don't have time, my company's not paying me to do this on this, like that kind of bad attitude. It's like, this isn't about your company. This will follow you for the rest of your life, like through the rest of your career, like that habit. It's bigger than that. It's like very going to be very necessary as the job market becomes more complicated over the next few years, which it will. It's going to be a lot of change, right? I feel like this is the big hack, is to be very active and put yourself out there. um do you find that a lot of people don't know themselves, don't know their value proposition? Like when you ask, I find even clients, like when you're asking them to articulate their value proposition, they're like, yeah, like integrity, hard work. I'm like, that's every single company on earth. Like, what is your
Yeah.
value proposition for real? I feel lucky that all my clients are ones where there's a narrative that I can take, and we talk about it. This is a narrative that I can take to market. Amazing. You can sell a narrative all day long. A company whose values integrity and hard work and whatever, it's just like, you might
Yeah.
as well say no words at all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I feel most, that's probably like 70% of people and companies
Yeah.
just don't know how to articulate that, because they've never really had to. Like, I'm always amazed at, like, I work in a space where, I mean, these people are brilliant. They go to the top schools. They're incredibly smart. But when it comes to certain things, I think, oh, you're just so dense on this. Don't tell them I said that either. Dense on, like, and I mean that in a way that they've just never had to put the thought
Yeah, for
into,
sure. Yeah.
okay, why would someone want to work here? Like, why, like, just certain things, like what are they getting besides, like, all right, they're gonna like work on these amazing deals, but like, what else? What is the substance
Yeah.
of this firm? What is the soul of this firm? And and getting into these deeply reflective questioning, lines of questioning, can be really difficult, for them as hiring managers, and then alternatively, when you're looking at them as candidates, and you think, like, what's, like, even just a simple question, like, what's going to fill your cup right now
Yeah, yeah,
at
yeah.
this stage of your career? And it's like, well, I want to go somewhere where like there is a nice culture. Okay, 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 but what does that mean, and why is it important to you?
Right.
Right, like, those are the questions, because can't expect to, like, you're never going to find what you're looking for if you don't have a very clear idea of what it is that you need right now. And so yeah, I wholeheartedly agree that most people don't really understand that. They've never really put the time or thought into that. Most people in general are not very reflective. I feel like you need to get to a certain stage of your life, to kind of to look inward, right? And you usually have like certain inflection points, and we each hit them at different points of our life, right? So it's not a surprise that a lot of people that we work with, just really have a hard time with that exercise, just because they've never really had to kind of put into words, what they're bringing to the table, what that value is, and or even really what they're looking for at, if they're looking for, like, at the next stage of their career.
Absolutely. Now, so I'm a huge nerd for things psychotherapy and psychoanalysis on the side. And I came across, we did podcast episode with the two co-founders of Raymond George a long while ago about the fact that we were doing podcasts and videos. So it was a podcast about podcasts and video and what did we learn and how has it changed things. And I brought up this idea from Jacques Lacan, the psychoanalyst, which is a word that's extimacy, not intimacy, extimacy. And what it means is getting to know yourself outside of yourself. Example, if you hear one of your friends describe you, right? One of your close friends or someone who has a nickname for you. That's like an intimate piece of knowledge, but it's public. And I actually feel that doing this kind of stuff, doing content on LinkedIn and putting yourself into the professional, but mixing the personal and the professional in a public way, like doing videos and podcasts and whatever, has actually helped me understand myself better and understand what I do and don't like, understand my story and who I am and what I do and don't need. Do you feel the same way doing this kind of, because you have your own podcast as well, that part of why you're able to know yourself so well in the market and what you need and don't want is because you're doing this? Do you feel it enhances you understanding your brand?
I feel like it's been more of being a business owner. It's really like exposed, my areas of weaknesses and where I feel I'm really strong. I don't know if it's necessarily having the podcast or having it's more of like being a business owner because, like there's no one to blame. There's no one to, it's just like, it's all on you. And so I feel like that if you ever want to really understand like what your strengths and weaknesses are, start a business and let's just see how that goes. And it will expose a lot of things and you will learn a lot of things about yourself. But I mean, I suppose like me having a podcast, allows me to kind of, I've always known, I guess, that I've always been like someone that can speak in public. Like I've never had an issue speaking in public.
I believe that.
Some might say I'm good at it. So I've never been afraid to talk to people. That's the thing. Like I've always, even as a little girl, like I would be able to speak to adults and it wasn't an issue for me. So I think like with the podcast, it was something where it was like, all right, this is something I should leverage because I'm one of those people that isn't afraid to speak to people, likes talking to people. And that's far better, that's a far better use of my strengths than anything else. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I feel like, I guess to answer your question, I would say the business is really what's revealed, what I'm really good at and what I'm maybe not so good at. And the podcast has just kind of been an extension of, me understanding that, okay, I have this kind of, strength of being able to connect with people and talk to people. And so let's leverage that. And it's been really good for me. Like, I use the podcast as a business development tool. It's just a really great way to, look, we're here because you were, right? It's a business development. I'm going to know you now. I don't know you, but I know you now.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, it's just a really great way to kind of develop, I think, the strength that, I think I already had. And then, I mentioned to you that like, I've been doing like this hobby of mine of acting, of this, midlife crisis, of acting on the side.
You can act anytime. You don't need to belittle it by calling it a midlife crisis thing.
I know I've kind of said, because people are like, well, oh, are you going to be an actress now? I'm like, no, I'm just like, it's something that gets me out of my world. It allows me to also do something that I think very kind of piggybacks off of like the podcast and just being, kind of a speaker on, on like my day-to-day with work.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I think probably because of the podcast, that is what led me to think, okay, maybe I should just do this for fun. And so it's been kind of another facet to exercise that muscle that, that I know I have when it comes to speaking, in just like a very off the beaten path way. So yeah, that's what I'm going with.
No, but I think that's great. Honestly, I do think that all the things that you're doing, we said sort of jokingly before, like things that people can learn from your example, I think you're doing a lot of stuff that puts you in a position where you're comfortable to communicate things to people in various different ways, right? Clients, candidates, whether you're doing a podcast, your branding is very personal, you're mixing the personal and the professional, even the acting is, it's just gets you better at interacting with humans, which I actually think is going to be the whole job market soon. I think in the 2030s, that's going to be the entire job market, because a lot of other stuff is going to be automated. There isn't going to be a need to do a lot of other things aside from interacting with humans. So I think like the better people can get and the more they can lean into hobbies that help you with that, the further you'll go. If anybody wants a hack as to what, that's where my firm belief is that this is where things are all going. And I feel like you're kind of already a few leagues ahead just by, naturally by being who you are.
Well, I don't know about that, but I, but I do agree with you. Like that is where we're moving. And it's funny. Like I have a 13-year-old daughter, and she, was talking to me about what she wants to do when after college. And so she's like, I don't know what I want to do. She's already kind of starting to fret about like what is my future going to hold for me.
Yeah.
Like you just need to get really good at talking to people, being curious, asking really good questions. That's what's going to distinguish you from all the rest of the kids out there, because they're not gonna know how to do that. And at the end of the day, people that are still hiring and that are making decisions are the old people like me, as she would say. Like we are still going to be the ones that are, those mid to senior levels of management are the ones that are still going to be making the calls for at least another 2 decades, I think.
Yeah.
Right. And so like you have to find a way to build that relationship, that generational, that relationship despite that generational gap. And that's going to be really important is knowing how to talk to people and just being curious and asking, like I said, like asking really good questions, or just asking questions. They don't even need to be really good questions. Ask questions. Like you'll get better at asking questions the more you do it, right? You just need to ask questions, but always be curious to understand, what they're, like about them, like what they're doing, their life, their problems, like, we've gotten to the point where she's like, well, how do you make like a ton of money? Like that's because of course that's what everyone wants to make. I'm like, well, look, like the bigger the problem, the more money you can, the bigger the problem, the more money you can make if you can solve that problem. So you have to always be curious to understand what those pain points are. And I think that is like, she's 13 now. And I think that is like what it is in general, anytime, anywhere, for anyone. Like you just need to be able to talk to people, understand what's going to make their lives easier, and just get really, really curious, and just get really uncomfortable too. I think that's like another thing that like I find myself saying a lot, and me trying to do, is just getting as uncomfortable as you can, because that's where you have stretch and growth. You really can't do that unless you are in a very uncomfortable, situation, where, like where you're going to be able to develop skills that you really wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
For sure.
So I, like I look back and I'm like, okay, how did I get into private equity? I'm like, well, I did something really uncomfortable. I said yes without really knowing what I was doing.
That's an example,
okay,
right?
go for it.
And for some people, that uncomfortable thing is getting out there and putting content up on LinkedIn and being themselves. But that's a great example too. Like somebody sent me this thing where Tony Robbins, who's been around forever, right, doing his personal self-help stuff, is like, my whole life I've been doing these really long seminars and everything, but really when you talk to anyone who's gotten really successful in anything, they've mostly just put themselves in an uncomfortable position and did what they needed to do day in, day out, got comfortable with being uncomfortable until it became normal, and then suddenly it was their life. Like all the things I've ever said can be distilled down to just that one idea. And I thought that was pretty telling.
It is. It really, really is. I mean, I don't even think you need to do it like all the time, like be uncomfortable all the time. I mean, you do it enough and it's not going to be uncomfortable, right? But I think you just, a lot of the times we are presented with opportunities and we don't realize that they are opportunities. And our first reaction is to say no, or to, kind of maybe pull away from it. And I think that that's a mistake. I think, whenever something kind of lands in your lap, it's a gift. And it's there for a reason, and it's there to teach you something. And I think like taking advantage of that and doing things, even if you don't know how to do it, is so important. Just, I didn't know how to do a podcast, right? And I did it. Like you probably, like no one teaches you to, do a podcast, like, right? Now there's courses.
Yeah. Now there's courses, but also beware of some of those courses, everyone. We can get into that another time, but some of them are scams. But
Probably. But I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you just kind of have to do it. Like, were my first episodes good? No, they're like the people that I had were great, but like
Yeah,
me, like no, like the sound is terrible, and that's fine. Like you just need to kind of start and get over yourself, and and be like, okay, this is kind of how everyone starts. No one starts as a rock star, right? You
exactly.
build up to, like going back to the metaphor here or the analogy of the rock star, right? Like you don't just you're not born a rock star. It requires, a lot of patience and purpose and intention and practice and sweat. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So I mean, it's kind of I think that that's something that is really important and a lot of people forget, especially as we get older.
Yeah, for sure. And that positive attitude, like you're saying, not to look at things that are uncomfortable or unexpected negatively and say no to them all the time and withdraw from them, but to have a positive attitude of being like, well, this is a fun challenge kind of thing. Maybe I can do it. You know what I mean? Back yourself a little bit. Realistically, of course, not too drastically when you can't do it. It's a good.
I mean, yeah, like last week I was invited to be on a round table at the university here, and it was in Spanish. And I don't do anything. I mean, I can speak Spanish because I've lived here for a long time, but I don't speak in public in
Right.
Spanish, right? And so I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's go for it. Like that's a muscle I need to exercise. Did I enjoy it? Not really. I did not enjoy it. And it was about, we were talking about AI talent and the future of work in Spanish.
Right.
And I have not done anything in Spanish. And so, but it's like, no, I have to do it. And it was fine. It was great. I made some really great connections. I had 3 meetings from that. And so I just kind of go into it thinking like, all right, why not just go and do
Yeah.
it, do your best, right? Like try to do it, you do your best. But when those things happen, like when they come to you, I kind of welcome them with open arms and say, okay, let's go. Right.
Yeah.
Like, like that's, I don't know. That's I guess my philosophy.
Exactly. Taking a leap of faith instead of being fearful, right? Is always a fun thing.
Exactly.
Well, Alexis, thank you very much. We are somehow already over an hour. I don't know how that disappeared. I also don't know how it's already 100 episodes. So obviously having a good time, the time flies.
Yes.
Thanks very much for being here. How can people reach out to you? What's the best way for them to reach out to you and or to find your podcast?
Yeah, I live on LinkedIn. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I think my handle is Alexis Alvares. And then the podcast is called Take the Stage. Again, like piggybacking off of the whole
A Rockstar theme.
Take the Stage, and then I do a feature for women called Ladies Who Rock. So it's all like very aligned.
It's all connected. Yeah,
it's all connected. You can find the podcast on any of the channels that you typically listen to podcasts on. But you could also find it on LinkedIn. So if you scroll to a little bit below on my page, you can go to the link and that'll take you to, I think, to Spotify. So you can reach out to me there. I'm always happy to connect with people on LinkedIn and to have conversations. So happy to connect if anyone wants to reach out.
Thanks, Alexis. Everybody reach out to Alexis for stuff. Thanks for watching Recruiting EQ for the past 100 episodes and look forward to seeing you.